18 men were sentenced to more than 1,000 years in prison after being convicted over a terrifying armed robbery at Alpha and Omega Farm in Marondera, a property belonging to the in-laws of prominent Zimbabwean businessman Wicknell Chivayo. But before we get to the shocking sentence, we need to go back to the night everything began. Because this was not an ordinary robbery, it was a carefully planned night attack involving 18 men, firearms, violence, and tens of thousands of dollars in cash. It was around 1 a.m. on March 18, 2025, when while the farm was quiet and most people were asleep, an armed gang descended on Alpha and Omega Farm. The men were heavily armed with 3 rifles, 2 pistols, 2 bolt cutters, machetes, and iron bars, and their first priority was to eliminate anyone who could raise the alarm. The gang confronted security guard Petros Mabuno, who was employed by DM Security, and assaulted him with an iron bar while demanding information about the other guards. They then confronted another security guard, Medic Jakata, who was also beaten and reportedly struck several times on the head with iron bar. The situation had now become a full-blown nightmare. The robbers force-marched one of the guards through the property and took him to Gerald Muteke's bedroom, where they demanded money. Gerald surrendered US $18,000 in cash, a pistol loaded with 8 rounds of ammunition, and a Samsung S23 cell phone. But the robbers wanted more. They wanted the safe. The gang entered Vimbai Muteke's bedroom and demanded cash and the keys to the safe. She handed over US $1,100 and a Chubb safe key, a Samsung Galaxy A35 cell phone. The gang then took her to the main bedroom, and that's where they allegedly hit the jackpot. Vimbai opened the safe, and inside was another $55,000 US in cash. The robbers took it, but unbelievably they weren't finished. They moved on to Kosam Siminya's house, where they ransacked rooms and stole cash, mobile phones, electronics, and other property. They allegedly took another $10,000 US from a wardrobe, along with iPhone 14, a Tecno Spark 8, and groceries. They even took $500 from a container containing tuck shop sales. Then they went into the lounge and stole a 55-inch Samsung television. Their final known target was the tuck shop, where they confronted Bosco Chidugudze, who was severely assaulted and robbed of his cell phone. At this point, the gang had spent a considerable amount of time moving through the property. But then something happened that may have changed everything. One of the guards managed to escape. The guard reportedly raised the alarm, alerting another security officer, Elfas Maruta. Maruta responded to the scene armed with 303 rifle, and suddenly the robbers were no longer completely in control. According to evidence presented in court, Maruta fired 2 shots towards the gang. The robbers allegedly returned fire, and then they fled. Just like that, the terrifying midnight raid was over, but the robbers had left behind something they couldn't simply outrun: evidence. The first arrest came remarkably quickly. By March 22, just 4 days after the robbery, police had arrested Kelvin Murewa, Peter Marambavia, Takudzwa Maishoreva in connection with the case. Investigations continued, and more suspects were subsequently arrested as detectives followed leads connected to the robbery and its proceedings. Reports also indicate that police recovered cash, firearms, and ammunition during the investigation. Eventually, the number of accused grew to 18. All 18 maintained their innocence and pleaded not guilty, meaning the case would have to be decided in court. And after a full trial, the court finally delivered its verdict. Then on Tuesday, August 18, 2026, Harare Regional Magistrate Masai Wona Shotgame handed down the sentences. 9 of the men were each sentenced to an effective 55 years. When those individual sentences are added together, they amount to 1,179 years, although a substantial portion of the sentence will run concurrently. So when you hear reports describing this as combined 1,000-year sentence, That's referring to the staggering overall figure. But the individual sentences actually add up to 1,179 years. And think about that for a moment. 18 men walked into that farm in the middle of the night, believing they could take what they wanted and disappear into the darkness. But more than a year later, their alleged actions had brought them before a court, and the judge handed down sentences that will keep them behind bars for decades. There is also a lesson here. Getting away from the scene of a crime does not necessarily mean getting away with the crime. Investigators can follow money, property, weapons, vehicles, and connections, and eventually a case can come together. What looked like a successful midnight raid ultimately ended with 18 convictions and more than 1,000 years of prison time collectively. The state was represented by Lancelot Mutsokoti. So what do you think? Were these sentences justified considering the violence involved? Or do you think they were too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. The link is in my bio. Crime with Zandi.